Okay, so there's something I've been wanting to talk about, or more so rant about recently. As many of you obviously couldn't tell, I am a huge Star Wars fan and have been a huge fan for most of my life. For as long as I can remember, I've been watching all the newest Star Wars shows and movies, and don't even ask me about my LEGO Star Wars collection. One thing I have to admit though is that Star Wars has been in a rough state recently, and it seems like many people have lost hope for the franchise for many reasons, whether that be because of the questionable writing, bad dialogue, even worse choreography, or the toxic fandom. As somebody who will always be extremely passionate about anything related to Star Wars, allow me to try to convince you that there is still hope for Star Wars despite these recent shortcomings. And I think the best place to start is going in depth on the reasons people hate Star Wars. Now, when I ask what Star Wars fans hate the most, the answer that I think would pop up in most people's heads is the sequel trilogy, for many obvious reasons. This entire trilogy was so disjointed and heavily lacked a vision. I don't understand why they had to have Rian Johnson write and direct The Last Jedi. The Force Awakens was a decent start to the sequel trilogy, and it would have made way more sense if J.J. Abrams directed the entire trilogy. But no, they had to have Rian Johnson come in and ruin what could have been an actually consistent trilogy. These movies were such a disgrace to George Lucas's legacy and metaphorically spat on all of his characters that were written so well before that point. What happened to the Luke Skywalker we all knew, loved, and looked up to? Is he safe? Is he alright? It is also so disappointing to think about how dirty Finn was done as a character. He was hyped up to be such an interesting character, being a stormtrooper who was supposed to become a Jedi. Instead, he was just tossed aside like everything else with potential in this damn trilogy. All they did was give Rey some terrible writing and make her the main focus of the entire trilogy. And for the record, I don't hate on Rey just because she is a woman. I only hate on characters when they are written poorly. Examples of female characters in Star Wars who were written well are Ahsoka, Leia, and Jyn Erso, just to name a few. You know why you never see hate for these characters? Because their writers had a brain for storytelling! But back to my main point. The only intriguing things about the sequel trilogy to me were Snoke and Kylo Ren. And they killed off Snoke so easily when he had so much potential to be a good villain, and they killed Kylo at the end of the trilogy. So yeah, there goes all of that. Also, I feel like the only semi-creative planet used in the sequels was Crait. If there's anything at all to appreciate about The Last Jedi, it's the cinematography, because goddamn was the Battle of Crait visually amazing. Unlike the prequel trilogy, there has been almost nothing to expand upon the sequel trilogy except for Star Wars Resistance. But who remembers that, right? I personally have watched Resistance, but I only did one time, and it was when I was taking a lot of pain meds after getting my wisdom teeth removed. I didn't absolutely hate the show like most people I hear talk about it, but I didn't think it was that great either. The show also has little to no effect on the main story as well, so you really aren't missing anything by not watching it, and the characters are so forgettable. As much as most of us want the sequel trilogy to be retconned, we should accept the fact that as long as Disney owns Star Wars, it will probably never happen. Now I know this has been getting a lot of controversy, but the Rey movie is probably going to be the sequel trilogy's last hope. If they actually do a competent job with the Rey movie, it could try to undo some of the many wrongs of the sequel trilogy, primarily with the character of Finn. Hopefully they expand on his Force potential in this movie and try to give some justice and respect back to John Boyega's character. I think that this movie is the only shot Disney has at trying to reinvest its fans in the sequel trilogy. And if it turns out to be as bad as we all think it will be, I think Disney will just have to resort to sticking with the timeline before the sequels, like The Mandalorian and Andor, or start making more content in the High Republic and Old Republic era. When I think of projects that Disney Star Wars has made that are absolutely terrible, the first thing to immediately cross my mind is the Kenobi show. Although my goal for this video is to defend modern day Star Wars, any hate for this show is absolutely warranted. I dislike every aspect of this show, and I honestly think they did more disrespect to the characters in this show than they did in the entire sequel trilogy. Reva as a character annoyed me in this show because it felt like they were trying to make it her show rather than Obi-Wan's show. They regressed Obi-Wan's character so they could redevelop him again in this show, which is extremely lazy, and his character was already well developed. Don't even get me started with the Grand Inquisitor. Also, how the f does a youngling get stabbed by the Chosen One twice and survive?
Wait a fucking minute.
I could rant about the Kenobi show literally all day, so if you want me to make a separate video on that, let me know in the comments down below. I feel comfortable with saying that most Star Wars fans would agree when I say that Dave Filoni has done an overall great job with the handling of Star Wars, but I feel like he has sort of been missing lately. The Ahsoka show, which he likely had full creative control over as Lucasfilm's chief creative officer, honestly felt like a bit of a disappointment. Something just felt off about the Ahsoka show compared to the great things Dave Filoni has been known to make, like the Clone Wars and Rebels. The choreography was noticeably bad in this show, and in many instances, like sometimes it was so bad that I think it straight up ruined certain important moments of the show. Sabine getting Qui-Gon'd and surviving is such a spit in the face to Qui-Gon Jinn. What happened to the consequences of being hit by a lightsaber? It is almost like lightsabers in general have been nerfed or something. Although Sabine has been hinted to have a slight Force connection in Rebels, it did not make sense that she was able to use the Force to the degree that she did in the Ahsoka finale. It seems like anybody can be a Jedi nowadays, and Jedis are starting to become less special. Initially, seeing Thrawn was quite the treat, but I feel like he was also nerfed in this show. He just didn't feel as smart and capable as he was in Rebels and in Timothy Zahn's Thrawn trilogy. There are too many moments in the show that feel so cheap and poorly written, like when the Ahsoka crew somehow dodges all of the orbital bombardment while riding on those wolves or whatever they're called. On a positive note, because I am defending modern Star Wars in this video, Baylan Skoll was probably the most interesting character in Ahsoka, and Ray Stevenson, may he rest in peace, stole every single scene that he was in. I also think Shin Hati was well done as a character. The outcome of Ahsoka, which results in Ahsoka and Sabine being stranded outside of the Star Wars galaxy, gives me hope that they can make a similar story to Timothy Zahn's Thrawn trilogy, leaving the Star Wars galaxy with basically just Luke and Ezra to defend it, which isn't too far off from the plot of the Thrawn trilogy. It was also great to see Hayden Christensen reprise his role as Anakin Skywalker during the Clone Wars flashbacks in The World Between Worlds. This was awesome to see, and the first time we got to see a Clone Wars flashback in live action. Another great thing that's happening, if you guys were unaware, is that a second season of Ahsoka has been approved, so another season of Ahsoka is likely to be released in the future. I really hope they nail the recasting of Baylan Skoll, because I feel like his story is far from over. Dave Filoni's been a part of a few other shows that I think most fans can agree are mediocre, like The Book of Boba Fett, Mandalorian Season 3, Resistance, and Forces of Destiny. Forgot this trash existed, honestly. I already have explained why I think Resistance is mediocre, and I really don't care about Forces of Destiny enough to even talk about it, so let's talk about why I think The Book of Boba Fett was so mediocre. And before I start ranting about this, I just want to state for the record that Jon Favreau wrote every episode of The Book of Boba Fett, and he and Dave Filoni were both executive producers of the show. The Book of Boba Fett had a great start in the first 2 episodes, where Boba is with the Tusken Raider tribe. It worsens after these episodes, and then the show gets taken over by the miniature Mandalorian arc, which should have been saved for The Mandalorian Season 3, let's be honest. This arc was amazing and made many fans happy after a mostly disappointing show about a Boba Fett who has gone soft and lost the qualities that originally made people like him. One of the episodes of this arc, Chapter 6, From the Desert Comes a Stranger, was written by Dave Filoni, and I think it was easily the best episode of The Book of Boba Fett, but there is one small issue about this arc. It intrudes on a show that is supposed to be about Boba Fett, and it ruins the entire point of the Mandalorian Season 2 finale. In the Mandalorian Season 2 finale, Grogu is taken by Luke Skywalker to be trained as his assumed-to-be first Padawan at the new Jedi Academy he is in the process of building. According to Jon Favreau, the Book of Boba Fett takes place 2 years after the events of Mandalorian Season 2, which means Grogu has been training with Luke for 2 whole years up to this point. Personally, I think Jon Favreau made this up on the spot to avoid some backlash. Grogu reuniting with the Mandalorian would have been way better from a storytelling standpoint to happen in the Mandalorian Season 3 or the upcoming Mandalorian and Grogu movie. Let's be real, they definitely reunited Grogu with Mando before Season 3 so they can keep making money off of him. This Mandalorian arc shouldn't have even been in the Book of Boba Fett show in the first place. It took away from the already weak story they were telling about Boba Fett, and those episodes would have been better used as Boba Fett episodes. The Mandalorian Season 3 was another show that Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau were both involved in. Jon Favreau wrote every episode and Dave Filoni helped write 2 of the episodes, those being Chapter 20, The Foundling, and Chapter 23, The Spies. Both of those episodes had great moments like showing Grogu's escape from the Jedi Temple, Moff Gideon's reappearance, showing Captain Pellaeon in live action for the first time, and Paz Vizsla's epic death. This is another instance of Dave Filoni's episodes being the best of a show. It is unfortunate that these 2 decent episodes that add quite a bit to the season are brought down by some of the other episodes that are so mediocre. I wouldn't say Season 3 of The Mandalorian was necessarily bad, but it was such a fall off from Seasons 1 and 2. There were so many stupid things in Season 3 that just added up and brought down the show as a whole, like IG-11 being brought back to be Grogu's exosuit. It was such a weird decision to go with, and an interesting concept to give Grogu an exosuit, but I also feel like bringing back IG-11 at all kind of demeans his death in Season 1. I liked how he was praised by the town, and they built a memorial for him, but then they try to undo all of that just for it to not go well, and he becomes Grogu's exosuit. Chapter 19, The Convert, is an interesting episode about the New Republic and Coruscant, but this is another case where we have an episode that doesn't fit with the story. Don't even get me started with Chapter 22, Guns for Hire. Jack Black and Lizzo being in this episode felt so wrong, and Christopher Lloyd's character felt wasted. That whole scene with the B-2 battle droid sprinting down the corridor was goofy and felt out of place. This entire episode felt like a side quest, and the only important part was the end. This is a common theme among many episodes in each of the Mandalorian seasons. In the finale, the Mandalorian is escorted by 2 stormtroopers even though he is a massive threat, and only 2 stormtroopers escorting him to his cell does not make sense at all. Like, what is Moff Gideon thinking assigning only 2 stormtroopers to somebody who can take out like hundreds of them? What is the point of capturing him if he's just going to be freed at the start of the next episode so easily? Moff Gideon's entire clone project is also just shut down with basically no consequence, which just makes his entire arc seem pointless. Moff Gideon's clone army being put to use to fight the Mandalorians would have actually made him more of a threat. I also don't know how to feel about the Darksaber being broken, but maybe it's for the better. At least the fights were pretty cool, right? Especially when the Mandalorians fought the jetpack troopers in the air. I just thought that was so cool. And also when Paz Vizsla fought the Praetorian guards. Bro, that just got me hyped up. Like, it was so nice to see visually, and just the choreography was great as well for the most part, which is rare to see with modern Disney Star Wars, but I'll give it that. And as much as I see people losing trust in Dave Filoni and his writing, I feel like his low points are pretty much outweighed by his high points. And his high points are like as high as Mount Everest. Come on. The man gave us Clone Wars, Rebels, Tales of the Jedi, and The Bad Batch. And speaking of The Bad Batch, let's talk about some of the good things modern Star Wars has produced. The Bad Batch is yet another show I feel like has unfortunately gone a bit under the radar. The 2 seasons we have gotten of The Bad Batch so far delivered pretty dang well on a story about a squad of genetically modified clones. The show takes us through a time period in Star Wars that we had never seen before at the very beginning of the Empire. It shows the process of how the clones were phased out in the Stormtroopers. We get to see more of Rex, Cody, and Gregor. We get to see some of the Empire through the eyes of Crosshair, and I think it is safe to say those episodes are considered the best Bad Batch episodes. The end of the 2nd season of Bad Batch started to get really interesting with the appearance of Mount Tantiss, which is one of the many things from the Star Wars Expanded Universe books the shows have been bringing back into canon lately. Mount Tantiss is one of Palpatine's secret storehouses where he had people run various experiments like cloning. I can see why the show gets some of the hate it does due to a considerable amount of the episodes being filler or close to filler, and Omega is kind of annoying sometimes. In Omega, or Omega's defense though, Ahsoka was also a pretty annoying character in the beginning seasons of the Clone Wars, but she grew to become a character that everyone loves. I feel like we need to treat Omega the same way and let the writers cook for the 3rd and final season. I also think that we will be seeing her in the future Star Wars projects if she survives this 3rd season. And regarding the bit of filler in these 2 seasons, which I agree is annoying to deal with when you have to wait a whole week for each episode to come out, it is not as bad when you have to watch the season as a whole. Not every episode needs to have a major impact on the plot in my opinion, unless there are not a lot of episodes like the live action shows. In this case, The Bad Batch has a lot of episodes, so I think it's perfectly acceptable to do this. When the important episodes happen in The Bad Batch, they hit hard. Every time you see Crosshair, you know it's going to be a crazy episode. By the time this video has been uploaded, the first 5 episodes of The Bad Batch Season 3 have already been released, and every episode has been such a treat. Each episode is extremely well done and is straight to the point and advances the plot nicely. Crosshair has always been my favorite member of The Bad Batch, and I love all the care he is getting. I really hope the show continues to be good and gives a satisfying conclusion to this beloved squad. And if you haven't watched The Bad Batch yet, I highly recommend getting caught up because this third season is going to get really spicy really soon. Tales of the Jedi is one of those shows Star Wars has made that I just straight up think is a 10 out of 10. The voice acting, the writing, the animation, and the respect for George Lucas' story is all there to the point that I wouldn't even be surprised if George Lucas made that show himself. It is all in the Clone Wars animation style, which in my opinion is the best animation style they've ever done. I really hope they continue to make shows like this and maybe do Tales of the Sith next time, or Tales of the Bounty Hunters. They could go in any direction with that style of show, and I would love to see it continued. Rogue One is my favorite Star Wars movie of all time, and my favorite project Disney has released since acquiring Star Wars. It's just an example of how much Disney can cook when they actually care about the project. Everything down to the cinematography, acting, dialogue, writing, originality, unique planets, and fan service is perfect in my opinion. It delivers a tragic yet hopeful story about characters who are unknown up to that point and are completely original to the movie. It shows the perspective of rebels and the sacrifices they had to make in order to fight back against the Empire. It also shows a bit of the perspective of the Empire and the internal rivalries they had. There are so many aspects of this movie that fit so well into the canon that most people forget that they were made in Rogue One and not from the original trilogy, like the U-Wing, MC-75, Death Troopers, and more. The only flaw that I see with this movie is that it is difficult to sympathize a lot with these characters because they were completely original to the movie and not developed a whole lot. But that is where Andor comes in. Andor is yet another amazing Star Wars show that is somehow dividing fans. I used to be somebody who hated on Andor for being boring and pointless, but I rewatched the show altogether and thought it was one of the best shows Disney Star Wars has made alongside the Clone Wars Season 7, Mandalorian Seasons 1 and 2, and Tales of the Jedi. I had originally watched Andor when it first released, and I had to wait weekly for a new episode to release. I would stay up until 3 in the morning on Wednesday in order to catch Star Wars Theory's watch party, and the lack of sleep combined with an episode that was purely for character development and nothing else gave me a very negative outlook on the show initially. After watching the show as a whole, I will always recommend binging the show for the best experience. Andor does a great job at developing Cassian Andor, a rebel who dies alongside Jyn Erso in Rogue One. He was a character that I had always appreciated when watching Rogue One. Andor doesn't rely on a lot of fan service unlike the other shows and movies. It brings a story that is fresh and original to the franchise. People hate it because it is slow and seems pretty inconsequential to the universe. Not every story needs to have a huge impact on the timeline. The best thing for Star Wars right now is a good story, and that is exactly what Andor delivers on. If any one of you guys watching this video still doesn't like Andor, I highly recommend that you give it another watch, and I promise it won't disappoint. I also saw that they just finished filming for the second season of Andor, which has me so excited for what they have planned. Okay, I'm pretty passionate about this one because I really love this movie, but why do we hate Solo, guys? Solo was left completely under the radar by most fans because of the unfortunate timing of its release soon after the monstrosity of a movie, The Last Jedi. Solo does a great job of telling the story of Han Solo, and the movie is a fun ride the entire way through. They did an amazing job with the recasting of Han Solo and Lando Calrissian. They executed their roles perfectly, and it really makes me want to see more productions with the recasted original trilogy actors, including Donald Glover and Alden Ehrenreich. I believe they are making a Lando show with Donald Glover, which makes me so happy and excited. I've never understood the hate for this movie though. It is significantly better than anything the sequels have ever accomplished. It is respectful to George's characters, and it actually makes sense within the Star Wars universe. So I would like to tell all of y'all watching this video something. Give Solo another shot. You might just change your mind about hating it. I'm just saying. Star Wars Visions is such a cool direction that Star Wars is headed, because each season is comprised of many short original stories made by different animation studios. I don't know if any of them are canon or not, but some of those episodes are just absolutely phenomenal. And some of them I wish they would make a whole show on it, like the Ronin episode. The second season was not as hot as the first one, unfortunately, but I definitely hope they keep making more of these types of shows. Modern Star Wars has lacked in video games over the past decade, but I feel like the games that did come out were pretty well received. Star Wars Battlefront was one of the first games I got in my brand new, at the time, PlayStation 4. I played it so much, and honestly, everything about the game is phenomenal. I made so many childhood memories playing that game. Battlefront 2 had a poor release, but eventually became a really great game that's time got cut short when Battlefield 2042 was released. I really think that stopping the development of Battlefront 2 was a bad decision because there is still, to this day, although not sizable, a considerable active player base on the game, and I feel like there was so much more potential for the game. EA also announced that they will not be making a Battlefront 3, which angered a lot of fans since it seemed like the logical approach would be to make a new Battlefront game since they stopped working on the last one. Battlefront 2 improved upon its predecessor in regards to having more than just one timeline and had way more heroes to offer. It was more like the traditional Battlefield games, but I think that was completely fine for it. It also added a supremacy mode that was cool in regards to being able to board the enemy's capital ship and destroy it. At the same time, those games had the potential to last extremely long and become too time-consuming for the average player. The space battles were definitely a weak point, however. Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor were both great games that told the story of Cal Kestis and had a lot of fun combat and parkour. I loved how you could customize his lightsaber and use different styles of fighting, especially in Jedi Survivor, which utilizes multiple fighting styles. The only issue with Jedi Survivor though was that it had a lot of lagging and crashing at the beginning of its release, which I could not even play the game for like such a long time. I had to actually pause and take a long break, and then later in the year I was able to actually play it because they finally fixed their damn game.
Rip to the homie.
Star Wars Squadrons is a game I love that went absolutely under the radar and just stopped getting developed not too long after its release. Squadrons had so much potential for competitive play and overall fun. The campaign was nice to play through as well, and it was cool to see the Starhawk be introduced in the canon finally. I really wish they kept developing Squadrons and added more things, but sadly nobody plays it anymore, and I think it's safe to call it a dead game now. LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga tried to improve on its LEGO predecessors, and I feel like it did that nicely. The fight between Anakin and Obi-Wan on Mustafar though was really disappointing, and that stood out to me as like the most disappointing thing that I saw in that game, but everything else was a lot better than the complete saga. And the game obviously majorly improved on visuals compared to the complete saga, but I like getting to explore every world you go to. That's just something that it brings a lot to the game to have an open world aspect. And also there are a lot more characters, but where the hell is the character customization? Like, I still don't think they've added that to that game, and you can only do it through mods, unfortunately. There are some games that were announced to be coming out in the future, like Star Wars Outlaws made by Ubisoft, the mobile game Star Wars Hunters, Respawn's The Mandalorian first-person shooter, which I believe was just recently rumored to be cancelled now, which is just like, what the fuck? And Quantic Dream Star Wars Eclipse. It was also just recently announced that the original Star Wars Battlefront games are being released on March 14th, and it will be featuring 64-person multiplayer lobbies, which has me really excited. Star Wars has been in desperate need of a multiplayer game recently, after the death of EA's Battlefront 2, so this revitalization of the original Battlefront games, which most fans tend to agree are the best Battlefronts, is a step in a good direction for Star Wars. One of these games that I am anticipating the most is Star Wars Eclipse, but a lot has been happening around it recently. I'm pretty sure it was cancelled or delayed indefinitely last year, but recently it was said to be back in development, which is a good sign, but is probably a long time away from being released. I think a game that Star Wars would really benefit from would be a GTA-style, open-world game kind of mixed with No Man's Sky, where multiple people could fly all around the galaxy doing whatever, and can have whatever occupation they want, like a Jedi, Sith, bounty hunter, or even something as simple as a farmer. Honestly, this is probably just massive copium, but one can only dream, right? Well guys, I hope this video has helped to convince everyone watching that there is still hope for Star Wars and good storytelling. I think they are trying to cook up something with the upcoming shows and movies, and I think we should all strap ourselves in for the interesting ride we have ahead of us. So if you watched this far, I appreciate you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this type of content. I know it is way different from my usual type of content, but I definitely felt way more passionate about making this video compared to a lot of my past videos. So please consider subscribing and liking this video. It really helps when you do that. And this is your boy, Narf Boy, saying bye. Bye.